Hello! Today I'll be looking at this exciting package from BetaFPV. But just before we get into it, a quick reminder to please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it, comment down below, please subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to click on the little bell icon which will tell you when I'm uploading stuff. So what have we got from BetaFPV? It's an interesting one. It's the Beta85 Pro 2. Now I had the Beta85 HD, which had the Cadex Turtle 2, which was I think the best of the Acro-Whoops in terms of the smoothness, but I wouldn't have really called it an Acro-Quad because you wanted to fly it smooth, and it still had the issues with, you know, it's got ducks because it's Whoop style, and you sometimes had that little bit of squirrely yaw spin when you were sort of coming out of dives and that. Now this has been inspired by someone else's build called the Shutterbug. I hadn't heard of it, but it was developed by Justin Davis and Nate Payne. So they developed the Shutterbug 85, which I didn't see at the time, but this is what BetaFPV said is their inspiration. And basically what they wanted to do is go away and make this style of quad an actual proper acro quad. Now in the past we've been like, yeah, they're okay, but they've got the problem with having those prop guards there, slowing it down. Sometimes the power to weight ratio is not right, so you get that bit of squirreliness. And I've kind of been looking at the toothpicks as sort of replacements for a pure speedy outdoors quad. But interesting that they've sort of taken inspiration from what other people have put together, and they reckon this is going to be a decent acro quad. So let's take a look. In the box, don't get an awful lot. You get this little thing from BetaFPV with QR code for the manual. You get this 2S 300 mAh battery pack, and you get this spare camera mount and the actual quad itself. And what I instantly notice about this one is how much lighter it feels than the standard 85X HD I've got, because of course that's carrying a lot more. But I'm thinking power to weight might be quite interesting because it's got these Avon Pro 2-inch props here, and the whole thing is very, very light. It weighs 42 grams without the battery. It's got a very sort of nice profile to it with this canopy again. Of course you can't angle the camera in there, that's why you've got a replacement camera mount, and you've got STL files available there. Spec wise on this, we're looking at 1103 11,000 kV motors. The camera is mounted at 35 degrees, and as mentioned it's an 85 mil frame with these 2-inch Avon props. Doesn't mention what the flight controller is. Just looking underneath I can see it's branded BetaFPV and it's an F4. I believe this is the SPI version because I can't see any other antennas sticking out of it. We'll see how that goes. But again, it's fairly short range anyway. Let's get this bound up, let's get it onto Betaflight, see how it looks. So here's a little whiz through Betaflight. Ports wise, we'll see that it's just got the USB connector and TBS Smart Audio. A good clue here is that we must be using the SPI version then. D-Shot 600, motor stop not on yet. I'll be changing some of this. It's got 8kk loop. And I just did a bind, and the only thing I changed there, it was set to FreeSky X. I've changed it to FreeSky D before I bound it because, well, FreeSky X tends to overload it. At the moment we're running, you'll see that around 30% without anything really going on, which is quite high already, so I don't want anything like D16 mode. I'll be adding a beacon tone for RX set. Power battery, I'll be upping the max cell voltage. This comes with a regular battery, but I checked with BetaFPV and they said you can use a high voltage. I'll up that to like 4.5. Bit tuning, this is what it comes with. It looks like it's been messed around with. I'll up the super rate. This is running the 400, and it's one of the beta versions of 400, so I'm using the 1040 Betaflight configurator. Receiver wise, I am connected up. I've got now a sort of a generic SPI quad now, so I can keep them all the same. And Modes, this is what it comes with. Quite a good selection, I think. Pretty much what I've had. Arm, angle horizon, air mode, flipper, crash. The only thing I'd add to that is beeper, so I'll sort that out later. And OSD wise, fairly sensible. I quite like the layout there. I just tend to put things up in all the corners instead of sort of filling it up down the bottom. So I'm going to make a few small changes there, and then yeah, we can take it out for a fly. Okay, we're here with the Beta85X Pro 2, and we want to know if it's going to acro. We're in this quite restricted area. Now, depending on how well the camera works because we're in sort of slightly dim light. I might take this to a more open area because sometimes if it's the camera that you normally get in this sort of quad, it tends to darken a bit and then you don't know where you are above the trees, which is bad. But I haven't even hovered it yet, so let's just get it up and see what happens when we try it. So here we go for the maiden, and immediately I'm picking up just a little bit of wobble there on the camera. There's a little bit of jello that seems to get in from the little CMOS. And the other thing I notice, and you can see it in the DVR recording here, is when we look into that rather dim lit sky, the ground detail goes very dark. This is a real problem if you're flying over anything where you're going to want to sort of pick out a gap and stuff. So it makes it a little bit harder to get through. We don't generally get a camera with a decent wide dynamic range in these little quads, unfortunately. They really do make a difference. And this one just hasn't got one. How's it feeling to fly? Yeah, it's okay. It feels reasonably speedy. It is still just a little 2S Whoop style, but that power to weight ratio doesn't work badly. That said, there's plenty of times we're stuffing it up to 100% to get where we want to go. We have to be quite brutal on the throttle to really get it to perform. But you can acro in it, you can go in and out of the trees. That's no big deal, and that bit seems to be doing what it's supposed to do. Essentially, you can go out and you can acro this thing, and you've got enough power, even on this 2S battery, to do the maneuvers you want to do and have plenty of time in the air floating around. And of course, the thing is so light, and it's got plenty of power to weight ratio that you can put it in a dive, pull out. You haven't got any of this weird yaw washout or anything like that. That said, of course, it's a ducted quad, so you do face problems in the wind, and of course it's so light that any wind is going to cause this a problem. So just watch out for the day. And of course, if you've got a nice sunny day, you're going to have a much better experience in a day like this, where everything's a bit dim and making things harder to see. What I decided to do is just mistime a little turn here and stick it into a bush, of which it took me a long time to recover it because it managed to drop right down in a big thorny bush. It was still flying fine after that one, but I decided to take it out to a different location. So here's location number 2, and you can still see how bad those clouds are and how nasty the lighting is. I wanted a bit more of an open area just to make sure I didn't have anything to worry about underneath me. And as you can see, you can happily pull off all your maneuvers and have a nice little acro time with it. Even in an open space, it's a fairly good quad for practicing these little maneuvers, but it still feels better when you're down in proximity, you've got something to fly around, that sort of thing. Another thing I don't like about this camera, and again it's quite typical of these sort of cameras that go in these little whoops, they're very wide angle and they do tend to distort down at the side, and that makes it a little bit weird when you're coming sort of out of a roll or out of a flip and trying to get lined up there. It just doesn't seem to be obvious because the distortion, the way that works. Now, one of the disadvantages about taking it out to an open site like this is you're going to hit things like the wind rushing through and stuff, and this actually held up pretty well. I didn't feel I was like really slug-like here. As far as once you get in the air and you're flipping it around, it feels quite good. It's just obviously its straight line speed is just not there when you compare it to any 3-inch or 5-inch quad. But I still had some good fun messing around with it in the field, and the range of the little SPI receiver worked fine for this sort of flying you'd be doing in here. Also, I didn't have a flight where I didn't at least crash it once, and this one was a doozy, as I was just coming over this tree here, and I decided to go and put it straight in like that, right up the top. So yeah, it did come back out of the tree. I went over to the tree, I couldn't see it, and I just blasted the throttle quickly, and then it flipped down. Of course, at that point I'd stopped recording in my goggles, and when I finished the flight off with the rest of the battery, I also forgot to record that on the DVR, but it's kind of much the same. So what do we think of this little dude? Well, it managed to fulfill its brief. It's a little 85mm whoop that you can acro with. That worked quite well. What didn't work so well for me was the type of camera we had here. I didn't like the distortion on it. I didn't like the way it handled the light. It's kind of a little bit sort of old hat in terms of what you can get nowadays appearing on smaller quads. And when we talk about like an acro quad, we're up against things like the new generation of toothpicks, and if we took something like this, which I haven't actually looked at yet, odds on this would outmaneuver it and certainly go a hell of a lot faster, even on 2S. So there is that. Is this kind of the sort of the old school way of doing things? I mean, there's pros and cons, of course. You've got the ducks there. They don't like the wind that much, but if you're bashing into stuff, you can fly in a house with it. If you're in a tree, it's easy to get out again without smashing all the props up. So yeah, it's okay. But you kind of need one of these people that says, I specifically want a ducted quad. I want a Whoop style quad for doing my flying. And if you're indoors, zipping out to the garden, doing the odd bit of outside stuff, that's absolutely fine. But if you really want to rip round with something micro, you're probably looking more towards the toothpick style quad at the moment. But yeah, if you're in the market for a 2S Whoop style acro quad, this is pretty good. So this has been the BetaFPV 85 Pro 2 and was supplied for review by BetaFPV, so thanks very much to them, and of course you can find it on their website where there'll be links down below. Hope that review's been helpful, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.